So I want to speak briefly about monarchy in the UK. I'm going to keep this relatively brief. I know I say that in a lot of videos, but I will try to. One reason is I've been uploading a lot of videos recently and they take longer to upload the longer they are. Secondly is that I don't know in detail all the issues that I want to discuss, so it would be remiss of me to make a longer video and just babble on about things that I actually don't know all the details about. So I'm just going to voice my own opinions on this. I am making this partly in response to a comment that I've just read. So to be honest, it is a spontaneous video. One of the videos that I've literally decided to make this in the last 20 seconds. So it is very spontaneous, as are a lot of my videos, to be honest. But that's maybe a good thing because without planning anything, I speak, with absolute conviction. Um, so the post I came across was basically it was something to do with the Queen's birthday. Queen Elizabeth II will turn 90 on April the 21st, which makes her the first sitting monarch in British history to reach this age. She is already the oldest monarch and already the longest serving monarch, having surpassed Queen Victoria in October last year. So it's quite a significant event in that regard. But this guy basically had a post. This was on Facebook. He had a post that said, all the people here disagreeing with the monarchy, in my opinion, you're just arseholes. There was nothing else to it. There was no elaboration. There was no nothing there. It wasn't, from what I could see, that he was insulting people who were insulting the Queen. So, as a royalist, just kind of fighting fire with fire, it looked to me like he was just insulting them because they hold Republican views. Now, at this stage, I I wouldn't say I'm neutral. I'm broadly speaking a royalist. Broadly speaking, perhaps um, I might be a Republican in the future, depending on how feasible that situation may be. At present, I think constitutional monarchy is good for the UK. It is a huge part of our history. Um, on previous videos, I would have talked about the tourism factor, but to be honest, I don't know how much of a factor that is, i.e., how much revenue the royal estates take in terms of tourism. So I don't want to use that to conjecture that as something that would be an argument in favour of monarchy because, to be honest, I don't know. I just don't know. Depends on the source, and obviously, this is something that sources are going to be biased on, depending who you look at. If you look at a royalist source, they're going to spin it their way. If you look at a Republican source, they're going to spin it their way. I do find it very, very difficult to see this country outside constitutional monarchy. It's very difficult to imagine a British president. But just because you can't imagine something doesn't mean that it's inconceivable. There's many of the republics around the world would have at one point been monarchies, and I'm sure at the time they were monarchies, it would have been inconceivable that they would one day be republics. So I don't think we should say, "Oh, it's never going to happen here." There is a lot of things that could happen in the future that could dictate the entire constitutional framework of this country. We don't have a written constitution, to my international viewers, but the framework of the United Kingdom is such that certain events could drastically alter the future of this country. Um, don't underestimate the European referendum on something like this. I'm not saying that would necessarily decide the outcome of monarchy, but I can see a trigger effect with something like the European referendum then impacting a possible second Scottish referendum, and I could see that changing everything. And it could be a trigger effect. I do believe that we are living in an era where there is great uncertainty about the basic foundations of this country. That's not to say we're about to become a failed state or anything of the sort, but I do think we're facing a period of great uncertainty. In fact, we're living in a period of great uncertainty. There is constant questions about, the threat of Scottish nationalism, and I do see it as a threat. I'm a staunch unionist. And if I was a Republican, I would believe still in a united Britain. A Republic of Britain, I would still be looking at an entire United Island about, in relation to that. So broadly speaking, I'm a royalist because I think right now it's okay for this country, and we don't have an absolute monarchy. We don't. Um, we have strong governments insofar as I think the balance is probably about right at the moment, but there is a fundamental argument to be had in saying that it is fundamentally undemocratic that the head of state is not elected. Now, we share our head of state obviously with Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and other countries of the Commonwealth realm. And the opinions in those countries tend to be quite similar to the UK in terms of opinion polling. They tend to be broadly pro monarchy. So the consensus in those parts of the world tends to be that overall people are happy with the status quo. But that doesn't mean everyone's happy, and it doesn't mean that they will always be content with the situation. I do feel that Queen Elizabeth II is a unique monarch, not only for her age and her longevity, but she is an ideal constitutional monarch. Now, without being morbid about it, when she passes away, I do feel that is going to really stir up a bit of an earthquake in the British monarchy. There is increasing questions as to whether Charles will follow convention and become king. He won't be Charles III. He's likely to become King George VII, if speculation is to be believed. Um, he may skip that altogether, and it will be passed to his son. Now, I think if that happens, that would be a sure way for the monarchy to be maintained. William is quite popular. He's young. He carries that flame that his mother had in terms of popular appeal. So I think William would be a popular king. On a personal level, I quite like Charles. Actually, I think he's a lot of his interests are things that are definitely what can be seen as, for want of a better term, progressive. He's very keen on environmental issues, interfaith relation, and so on. Those are all topical issues, and that's important. Charles, though, has been accused of being too political. Now, clearly, this would present serious constitutional problems if you have a constitutional monarch that interferes in politics. And that's not to say that Charles would go ahead and do that, but again, that presents questions. We are living in the year 2016 now. Is it really feasible that a head of state can't even have an opinion on matters? So it could actually be argued that constitutional monarchy limits a monarchy too much from that point of view. There's a lot of angles to take with this. There's a lot of angles to take with this, and I'm not even going to cover half of the details. What I will say, though, and I'll try and round it up with this, is that whilst I am broadly speaking a royalist, insofar as it's very difficult for me to see the United Kingdom being anything else, I mean, it's in the name of the country, the United Kingdom, and whilst monarchy has played a pivotal role in our history, and incidentally, David Cameron's staunchly in support of it. It's in his Cameron on Cameron book. I'm just saying that to offer a political perspective. Um, from what I gather, Jeremy Corbyn's a Republican, but he has said he's not going to make that a major issue of his leadership. Um, that to me indicates. Sorry, I'm maybe backtracking a bit here, but that to me indicates that he is a realist. He knows that there is just not a Republican appetite in this country. I will say one thing though, and this is extremely important in my line of thinking. We may be a constitutional monarchy, but we are, in theory at least, a democracy. Now, in a democracy, everybody should have the right to freedom of expression, short of, issuing threats. Now, when certain royalists come out with things like, "Oh, if someone's a Republican, they're a traitor, or they're anti-British, or they don't love this country," that sort of thinking is utterly backward, and very off putting to me. I'm a moderate royalist, but I will always, always, always defend the right of Republicans to have their view. It is true that some Republicans are quite vitriolic in the way they go about things. They outright hate the royal family. And some of the things they say I think is a bit unfair. There is a lot of personal character attacks on the Queen, which I think is unfair because it doesn't go hand in hand with her track record. For a woman of her age, she has shown a lot of tireless service in her role as a constitutional monarch. But there are also royalists who are outright sycophants, and they believe that Republicans shouldn't even have a point of view. Now, thankfully, we don't have a situation in this country like, to quote an example that I am very interested in, Thailand. We don't have lèse majesté laws in Britain whereby if you insult the Queen, you get jailed for 15 years. Thank goodness. I have been very outspoken about my views on Thailand's lèse majesté laws. Now, technically, Thailand's a constitutional monarchy, but if we ever get a situation in this country where there's legislation brought in that you can't offend majesty, I would be absolutely in the forefront of protesting it. And that would absolutely switch me to a Republican overnight because it's abhorrent. No, we don't have that situation in the UK. Cartoonists can make satire of the royal family, Republicans can have a view. And I appreciate if you're a Republican, you might say, well, we're constantly denounced and so on. You need to compare it to a country like Thailand. You do have more freedom of expression than that. Nevertheless, I do understand the perspective of those who say, well, if you're a Republican Britain, you're treated like shit. I really take issue with this idea that if people are Republicans, they somehow love the country less than monarchists. That's a lot of rubbish. Um, there may well be young men and women who love this country and they actually want to serve in the armed forces, but they may find that that's a difficulty for them because they're they want to serve their country, but they have to make an oath of allegiance to the Queen, so that prevents them doing that. I don't know if there's people in that position. I'm sure there are. They have Republican sympathies, but they also love their country. So basically, what I'm saying is, when it comes to this debate, both sides need to be respectful. Republicans, for their part, shouldn't be so vitriolic, and they should realize that constant personal attacks on the Queen is not. It's unfair, among other things, but they should just stick to the facts rather than getting the personal vitriolic rants. But Royalists, the same logic applies. They should respect Republican views. If you are a Royalist and you think that Republicans shouldn't have a view, then I've news for you. You're not a Democrat. And you are, as far as I'm concerned, far less British than someone who believes in freedom of expression. Freedom of expression is sacred as part of our values. And you cannot say that you're a British patriot if you want to silence someone else from having a point of view that is different from your own. By all means, have passionate debate. I'm not saying people can't have strong views, but both Republicans and Royalists are entitled to their views. Now, it is worth pointing out that the Royal channel on YouTube blocks opinions, so that is an indication to me that if we ever were an absolute monarchy, it would be an absolute monarchy. It would be a form of dictatorship. And they must constantly be reminded they are constitutional. They are a constitutional monarchy. Um, so yeah, there is a lot of the thinking behind some royalist arguments that I really don't like. I'm a royalist, but that doesn't mean that I believe either the Queen or any of her family is above criticism. I think the criticism should be fair criticism, but they're human beings and they should not be above criticism. Otherwise, we end up in a situation that is like Thailand, and you get a very, very nasty environment where people are persecuted simply for having an opinion. And the reason I keep saying Thailand as opposed to Saudi Arabia or Morocco, which are absolute monarchies, is because in theory Thailand's supposed to be a constitutional monarchy, but the environment there is a lot more like an absolute monarchy. So, you know, I I am a royalist because I just can't see this country being anything else right now. And it's not a case of better the devil you know. I like some of the traditions that we have. I think it gives us a uniquity. I think it is an important part of our culture. And frankly, I like some of the pomp and ceremony. I think it gives us a bit of a unique identity. But I will always defend Republican views. And I'm not going to say that we will have monarchy forever. I think monarchy, like everything else, has to adapt to the modern world. And yes, it's important that we have those old traditions, but never say never. If there does come a time when the monarchy seems so out of touch that they just can't relate to current environment and current opinion, then there might well be a case for transforming this country into a republic. One aspect about Britain, and I think this is a quick little history lesson here, this is a very important point to mention. During the Napoleonic Wars, just after France went through its 1789 revolution, of course, it's had more than one revolution. One of the overriding fears, of course, in Britain was that we would see some of the bloody chaos that was going on in France. William Pitt the Younger, the Prime Minister of the day, who is generally seen as one of our top prime ministers, is generally credited for keeping Britain relatively stable. We did have some urban unrest, there were some riots, but generally speaking, Britain has been a very politically stable country, much more so than most of our European neighbours, for actually several centuries now. We've had no coups d'etats, we've had no revolutions in at least 2 centuries. In fact, I believe the last proper revolution in the proper context of the word in this country was the Glorious Revolution of 1688. I may be wrong about that, but I believe that is the last time we had a full scale revolution in the sense of full scale revolution. Um, we have had important events since then. We've had important events in our legislation, like the Great Reform Act of 1830, the various acts of union and so on. But in terms of actual revolution, I believe it's been over 300 years. Now, there's very, very few parts of the world that sees political stability like that. We are one of the most politically stable countries in the world, notwithstanding the troubles of Northern Ireland and the wider conflict in Ireland. But leaving that aside, mainland Britain is one of the most politically peaceful countries on earth. We take it for granted that when we have general elections, there's a transfer of power. Yes, there might be heated debates, but it's never violent. Nobody ever loses their lives in a British general election. And we've got so adapted to it that I do think we take it for granted. Now, it wouldn't quite be accurate to say that it's constitutional monarchy that has guaranteed this, because there are republics that are relatively stable as well. But it goes without saying that the facts are the facts. The UK is one of the most politically stable countries on earth. That's something we should be very grateful for. But I'm not sure if you could say that royalty in itself, solidifies that, because Thailand has had something in the region of 16 coups d'etats in the last 100 years. It's a very politically unstable country, and yet it also is a constitutional monarchy. So I don't think you could just say that monarchy is a guarantee of stability. I think that's a dubious claim. Anyway, I'm going to round it up here. Let me know your thoughts, whether you're Republican or Royalist. Either way, please keep it respectful. I believe I have, so please keep it respectful. If like I say, if you're a Royalist, by all means, feel free to voice your views here. But any sort of comments like those, traitor Republicans, this or that, I'm going to delete the comments, because I don't want my channel to become a platform for that sort of divisive rubbish. Likewise, any Republican views that are overtly hateful or vitriolic, I'm going to delete. So thank you for watching, and let me know your thoughts.